Welcome back, everybody. Full transparency, I have tried to start this video 5,000 times talking about Norwegian Wood and nothing is coming out. I think I have just too many thoughts on the book, maybe, I don't know. Just took a shower to clear my mind. I'm going to start instead with the Zadie Smith Feel Free essay collections, which I'm probably not even ready to talk about, but hopefully this is a good starting point, flows well, and then I can talk about Norwegian Wood because I have so much to say. Or don't, I guess. But so this is the essay collection I'm reading right now. Zadie Smith, Feel Free. I mentioned this a while ago. I said I was going to finish it with the Murakami and some other short story collections that I'm reading. But I'm only halfway through. I do really like it. I just think that, I don't know, I don't have any other essay collections. I kind of want to, when I'm in a mood for essays, I'm in a mood for essays. I'm going to read it. And I think I'm just going to drag this one out. But I just kind of talk about it because I figure I'm not going to, again, unless there's a really interesting essay that I decide to bring up. I would say that this is really, really cool. She's an excellent, excellent writer. I haven't read any of her novels. I obviously have to. It's really cool how she formats this. There's kind of subsections. So part 1 in the world, part 2 in the audience, part 3 in the gallery, on the bookshelf, and then Feel Free. And you can kind of get a sense of what's coming up based on those. The foreword's really interesting. She reflects on, as she does in a lot of interviews, kind of the idea that why would anybody read what I'm writing, which is something I obviously think about a lot. I mean, I feel like most people that attempt to write do, maybe not everybody, but it's a really interesting thought. It all starts with one of her friends telling her that your writing so far has been a 15-year psychodrama, which is pretty funny, I guess, but not really if you're the writer. Some of the most interesting essays I've read so far have to do with Key and Peele, which that one was really interesting. I mean, I love Key and Peele. All the skits are great, and I was kind of where's she going with this? She was kind of just talking about, what's crazy is how many, the interaction she has with these people, right? She's sitting down to lunch with Jay-Z, she's on set with Key and Peele. There's a lot of really interesting ideas discussed, politics that are dived into that I don't know anything about. One of them was on Brexit. I didn't know a ton about that. So it's really interesting. I'd say that reading these kind of things, it expands what you know about. The reason to read somebody else is to get into their mind and experience the music they enjoy, or the politics they deal with on a day-to-day basis, or the thoughts they have, or just their lives overall. And this is a great, essays in general kind of have that idea. It was the same thing with Knife by Salman Rushdie. I felt like I was really inside his head, learning everything about him. And I would say this is great. I'm excited to read the rest. It's going to be a slower pace. If there's any particular essays that stick out, I will talk about them. But yeah, I mean, some were great. Another interesting one I'll mention is there was one on Joni Mitchell. Kind of highlighted how much she always hated Joni Mitchell for no reason, really. She couldn't, the sound. I'm not gonna read the essay, but it was really cool how in an instant, bam, like that, all of a sudden she loves her. And that was really interesting. But yeah, I think this is great. I think essay collections are always great, especially if your favorite authors put them out. And my dad's reading a book by her right now. I forget which one. The Fraud, yeah. He's reading The Fraud right now. And yeah, I'm definitely going to read some more of her stuff, but this is a really cool insight. And yeah, I think always have some short stories or essays that you read with your books. It's nice to have those short things every now and then. Okay. Norwegian Wood, Haruki Murakami. Synopsis first. I'm going to try not to even think about it. But so Toru Watanabe. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Murakami for messing up his characters' names if I do. So Toru Watanabe is a student in Tokyo studying. It's a kind of a coming of age book, if that makes sense. And he is at a dormitory. It's kind of a weird setup. A lot of the beginning focus is on his roommates, the people in his dorm, and his best friend died at 16, was it? 16 or 17? And his best friend's girlfriend, who he kind of always hung out with the two of them. Weird kind of dynamic. And so the story starts, which I love. Toru is in an airplane. He's 39 years old or something. And he hears Norwegian Wood by the Beatles, and it brings him back to this moment with Naoko. And that's really cool. I love those kind of intros. It doesn't, I wish it came back to it at the end. it doesn't really. He kind of like spaces in and out sometimes, but yeah. So Toru and Naoko are connected by Kazuki, their friend, her boyfriend, his friend, who passed away young. She is dealing with a lot of issues throughout this book. He does fall in love with her, although I don't understand how that happens. That's one of the major parts that I had a problem with, is there seemed to be, one, no hesitation with falling in love with his dead best friend's girlfriend, and two, it didn't really feel like he actually fell in love with her. It was just all of a sudden like it was spoken about, like that was the case, which was kind of weird. The other important part here is Midori, who is a girl that Toru meets in class, and she's a much more liberated, expressive, out there person. Now, you're probably hearing this, and when I read the description, I kind of felt that way. It's like, the fragile girl and the manic pixie dream girl. Like, it was that rubbed me the wrong way, kind of I would say up to like page 150, like halfway through, I was like, these tropes are getting out of hand. I'm not liking this stuff. Part of it was like the way he was talking, the dialogue didn't feel real, which somebody had mentioned was going to happen on a video, and I was like, oh, we'll see, but it did feel a little weird. I think he said good idea for the 5th time in a page, and I was like, I can't take this. It was like, let's go get a drink, good idea. I mean, it's just good idea to everything, and that sounds stupid as I'm saying it, but when you're reading, you'll see, probably. I felt like Murakami was pushing this middleman idea too far through the first like 150 pages or so. Toru's not like Nagasawa, this guy who sleeps with every girl he meets, but he's also not like his roommate, who is just this awkward, introverted kid. He doesn't speak too much. He kind of stays in the background. He's just like, he loves to read, he loves to do all these. It's just like, I changed my mind. I want to make that clear, but it felt odd towards the beginning. Like it was almost like Murakami trying to project. You know when like a writer is like trying to be like, this character's like me and I'm really cool, and it felt a little weird. People probably disagree, that's fine. That's just how I was feeling through the beginning of the book. And when Midori was introduced, it did feel like that manic pixie trope. But I want to say that by the end, well, the ending I didn't like. Like, well, let's say 150 to 250, I was really loving the book. I love the way Midori was developed. I felt like she was actually a really great character, my favorite character in the book, easily. I thought that I want to take away the mental illness aspect of Naoko for a moment. She seemed towards the end to actually deal with some crazy stuff, but the root thing that I think Murakami is addressing is Naoko lost her boyfriend at 16 and never recovered. Midori, on the other hand, is losing people left and right. She's taking care of her mother. Her mother dies, then her father. She's taking care of everybody. She shows up for Toru even when he doesn't show up for her. She shows up for the people she cares about, and she is ready to be there. Naoko wants Toru to wait for her, and then eventually Toru wants Naoko to wait for him, and they're very like, it's weird. I actually think that Midori was too good for either of them. But Midori also isn't that girl that authors throw in just for the guy. Like, she has real feelings, a real life, things outside. She's fine without him. In fact, she's pissed at him plenty of times. The letter that she writes to him when she's like, F off, that's probably my favorite little section of the book, because let me see if I can find it. So this is the letter. Basically, she wrote it while she was with him. This is going to sound kind of against my point, but what happened was she changed her hairstyle and he didn't notice. It really wasn't about that. It was the fact that he was not paying attention to her. He was thinking about this other girl, when this other girl, as he later notes, didn't actually love him. Like, this was all kind of a shared trauma and like relying on each other. It was a very unhealthy relationship, and he should have been able to see that. She definitely saw it, but she never was on him about it, because she wanted him to want her and want her only. And when he didn't, she said, what'd she say? P.S. Please don't talk to me next time we meet in class. But it's this really long letter, and she's not totally mad. She's just sad. She was so nice to her when she was having her problems, but now that he's having his, seems there's nothing she can do for him. He's all locked up, and she's not going to put up with it. She has a lot going on in her own life. She's moving, So I think that she's developed really well, and I probably didn't do her justice. I think if you read the book, you'll agree with me, at least with that, if nothing else. Naoku and Toru's relationship is just based on such an unhealthy mind state. Kind of a sadness that connects them that they mistake as some like deep, loving relationship. It's just not there at all. And I think that that's a really potent thing. I think this is a great coming-of-age novel, and I probably read it just around the right time, maybe a few years later even. But he's about the same age as me. I turned 20 in a couple days. So, yeah, I think that it was good. I'm glad I read it. There were parts of it that I certainly didn't love, but Murakami is a masterful writer. I've mentioned before that I love his short stories. I am not hugely into science fiction, and I think this is kind of more of a realism novel for him. That's what my teacher recommended this one to me, because we were discussing Murakami short stories, and I mentioned, I know a lot about his novels, and he's kind of the same way. And I don't know. It's not that I hate science fiction or anything, or whatever, drifting off into imaginary worlds, but I just haven't found my thing with that. I love some of the mad scientist stuff, I guess. Frankenstein's good, of course. And I mentioned The Great God Pan in a couple videos ago, but yeah, I'm really glad I read it. It's not my favorite. He's an incredible writer. Descriptions out of this world. The talent that Murakami has is incredible. I enjoyed the translation. I don't think that the translation had any effect on like the weird dialogue, because the descriptions were so beautiful. I think that's just the way he writes. He's a unique writer. I enjoyed the book, and I'd love to have some more discussion in the comments, because I definitely didn't say all that I had to say about it. But it's hard. I had so many thoughts while reading, like, oh, I'd say this, talk about that. Like, it's very interesting, but it would take a while. So I am going to hopefully talk about the Raymond Carver collection I'm reading, as well as kind of touch on the ending of the Claire Keegan collection. I did just get back from Croatia. Got a week in Stockholm before I go to Copenhagen. It was absolutely gorgeous in Croatia. Out of this world. I can't even begin to describe how incredible it was. I met some awesome people, got to see some really cool places. Truly thankful to be able to go there. I tried to take some videos. I don't know how many there are, but I'll put a little compilation after this. Still haven't gotten around to vlogging yet. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but yeah, we'll see. And took some cool pictures as well, I think, which will be on the Instagram if you want to check those out. I will get around to finishing this video in a day or so. But yeah.
My old man bought a big bass boat. When I think of that summer of hope I chose. 'Cause even if we didn't catch a little bit of something, we parked that boat by the bluff at the days. I got me to find trouble when things are alright. I pine for pain in the morning light. And even with my baby smiling next to me, I'm a self-sabotaging suicide machine. Cause I was raised by a woman who was hard to impress, and I carry that shit real deep in my chest. And I ain't never been one for cheap excuses, and apologies have always been a little useless. But if you give me 4 minutes and a little bit of time, I'll make them old ways an old friend of mine.
Hey everybody, we're back. I'm going to talk about Raymond Carver, what we talk about when we talk about love, and Walk the Blue Fields, Claire Keegan. I have mentioned these before. The last video I talked about an individual short story from each of them, and I've talked about Claire Keegan and some other ones, so I would guess I'll just start with this one. She is an incredible writer. I've said this a million times. The thing that I kind of wanted to get in here and talk about is more so that I couldn't finish the last one. I was a couple of pages in, and it happened a couple times. I restarted. I tend to give writers I really like a lot more credit, like they can't have a bad story. But with Claire Keegan, I really don't think she has a bad story. I think at this point I'm just a little tired of the ultra realist stories. Not that that's not all I read, but what I mean is, I guess I just need a novel right now. And I've been finishing these two for the past 2 days and reading a bunch of short stories online. I just need to read a novel, and I'm going to talk about what I'm going to read next at the end of this. But I didn't finish the last story. I'll come back to it at some point. I've tried a couple times. I'm just not in the headspace to follow all the details that she includes, which is the beauty in her writing, and if I can't appreciate that, there's really no point in reading it. So I guess I'll just mention the ones I really loved. I don't know how many of these you can find online. Often in these kind of collections, you can't, but I think there's probably a list in here somewhere. So I'll say, The Parting Gift was good, Walk the Blue Fields was great, that's the title one. The Forester's Daughter, probably my favorite out of everything. The Long and Painful Death I talked about last time. Surrender was alright. And then Night of the Quickened Trees I just didn't finish, and Dark Horses I didn't love. The interesting thing with Surrender, I will say, is that apparently it's based on, I have this here, John McAhern's father, who is an Irish writer, novelist, and kind of one of the early Irish writers to adapt this realist style. I maybe should have heard of him. It says here that he's one of the most important writers of the 20th century, but so maybe I'll check some of his stuff. So maybe I'll check some of his stuff out eventually. But the story goes that when his dad got married, he ate 25 oranges or something like that as his last act of free will. And so this latter story, she creates this, or not the last one, but Surrender, who the title is actually Surrender After McGahern, which is interesting. I'm probably saying that name wrong, but the character ends up doing that when he's finally forced to commit to this girl he's been courting for a while. And he's kind of a dislikable character in my opinion. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite story in the collection, but it was kind of an interesting anecdote that I found while reading about this a bit online. Something else that I found interesting is I love to listen to interviews with authors, especially short story writers. George Saunders is my favorite. I'll listen to anything he talks about. He always has some great writing advice, some really good insight on something. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast that came out a few days ago, Sam Harris's podcast, and in it Saunders is talking about this, which was interesting because I'm reading that, and also The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is up pretty close to next on my reading list. I don't have it with me right now, but so that was pretty interesting. But anyway, I've listened to some interviews with her. She seems to take writing in general, writing short stories, as something that is almost limiting, which is interesting, and I guess you can kind of see that in her work. And I've always kind of felt that way too, because when I started out writing poetry, songs. That was my kind of favorite stuff to write because I felt like I could cut to the point and really say what I was feeling. With a story, you're crafting a whole world. You're kind of limited in what you can actually say. You can't just like get mad about something and then go write about it, or happy about something and go write about it. You're kind of capturing an entire emotion, sort of, and leaving more in. There's more in what's unsaid often in these kinds of stories. In the Claire Keegan, Raymond Carver, they follow a similar style. And it's more about the reading experience, which is really interesting, and the amount of editing that they both do, I think, plays a significant part in that. But it was interesting to get her insight. She doesn't do a lot of talking, it seems like, but she's an incredible writer, and I can't wait to read small things like these so late in the day. I'm going to read all her stuff for sure. Foster, yeah. So speaking of editing, something interesting I learned about this book is that Carver's editor actually hammered the heck out of these stories. So this strip back style we're getting might not be the legitimate Carver or the Carver that everybody knows. I'm going to toss that aside because, I don't know, I'm just going to focus on the book itself because I think it's incredible. I think the strip back style is incredible. I don't love the fact that, like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter to me. I'd heard about this reading the book, and I listened to the Saunders podcast, and he was kind of like, you know, it is what it is. I think editors also play an important part. It's about creating the best possible writing you could possibly create that speaks to the largest amount of people, and whatever it takes to do that is whatever it takes. So I'm not thinking too much about it, but there are some incredible stories in here. I'll try to highlight some of my favorites. I talked about Why Don't You Dance, Mr. Coffee and Mr. Fix-It. Gazebo was really cool. Let me see if I can find the lines I wanted to read here. Okay, so this has to do with there's not going to be any spoilers. There's not any crazy plots to the things that he writes about. It's really about the reading experience. So when I spoil this story, you should still read it. So these two husband and wife own a hotel motel, and he cheated on her, I believe, with the maid that he hired. So the way that she's expressing this, how she's feeling about it, is here. Listen, she goes, you remember the time we drove out to that old farm place outside of Yakima, out past Terrace Heights? We were just driving around. We were on this little dirt road and it was hot and dusty. We kept going and came to that old house and you asked if we could have a drink of water. Can you imagine us doing that now? Going up to a house and asking for a drink of water? Those old people must be dead now, she goes, side by side out there in some cemetery. You remember they asked us in for cake, and later on they showed us around, and there was this gazebo out back. It was black, under some trees. It had a little peaked roof, and the paint was gone, and there were these weeds growing up over the steps. And the woman said that years before, I mean a real long time ago, men used to come around and play guitar out there on a Sunday, and the people would sit and listen. I thought we'd be like that too when we got old enough, dignified and into place, and people would just come to our door. That was one of my favorite parts in this entire book. I mean, wow. It captures so well, it's a real world example, or a real life example, and it captures so well what she is really feeling, which is there's no future here. I'm never going to feel that way. I'm never going to be that old lady that I wanted to be. He is so good about taking the lives of, I mean, he really focuses on working class, it seems like, but just an everyday person, not making anything magical out of the situation. And the title story, what we talk about when we talk about love, is, I just read this today because it's second to last, one of the best things I have ever read. Man, I can't even describe it, but the thing that I find most interesting that it focuses on is one of the women here. It's two couples, her abusive ex-boyfriend or ex-husband, I can't quite recall, and the way she's describing how he treated her and calling it love. It's a different kind of love than we have, but love. So it's just, he really investigates some powerful ideas, and the way that I have no words, to be honest. You've got to read this. If you don't read the whole thing, at least read what we talk about when we talk about love, the story. And Gazebo was incredible. I also wanted to read this intro. I thought this was funny. I'll tell you what did my father in. The third thing was Dummy. The dummy died. The first thing was Pearl Harbor, and the second thing was moving to my grandfather's farm near Wenatchee. That's where my father finished out his days, except they were probably finished before that. Just a great, great intro. The third thing that killed my father off is just a crazy title. So many of these titles are awesome. So Much Water, So Close to Home, After the Denim, Tell the Women We're Going, The Bath is not that great, but I could see the smallest things. Mr. Coffee and Mr. Fix-It. He's an incredible writer. I mean, I should have read his stuff a long, long time ago, I'm sure, but I am going to read way more Raymond Carver. Yeah, I mean, incredible. So these were both awesome, would highly recommend. I'd recommend just about everything in this video, I guess. But if nothing else, read this collection. Amazing. And then, I guess I'll finish this off just talking about what I'm going to read next. Up next is going to be Fathers and Children by Ivan Turgenev. I have read some of his short stories, but nothing else besides that. I'm pretty excited for this. This is what I mean when I need a little bit of a change of pace. I haven't actually read any Russian literature this summer, which is quite surprising, but I don't know, I've piled up too many books. And so there's that. I've been thinking about reading This Other Eden. I think that's the name of it. That sounds pretty interesting. And as well as Normal People. I actually might start this first. But that'll be the next video, hopefully. I might throw in a little short thing here and there. I have little Oscar Wilde, one of those little Penguin classics, as well as Rainer Maria Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet. So we'll see. Let me know if there's anything in there you recommend. I'm just going to start one for now and add some more. But yeah, so the next video might not be for a little while, but I hope you enjoyed this one. And just a big thank you to everybody who watched this. Yeah, I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are, and see you again soon.